is focused on informing everyone about the AI tools that have now become available at CSUB and how we use them. Perhaps a little bit less focused on research. However, a lot of the ideas I'm going to show to you today are actually based in sound theory from educational research. We do have a manuscript that is currently being reviewed for some of the prompts that I will show you today. The focus of today is basically what I said to introduce you to AI. I'd like to also point out this work is related to a grant that myself, Dr. Anjay Yadawara, and Maruti Mishra, as well as JJ Wong, who is our evaluator. And I see a lot of key people here too who are also involved on the grant, like Kanwal and Amin. Lots of people involved in the grant. The idea is that we are going to prototype these AI strategies and integrate them into the class and provide training to students. I'll explain a little bit more about our grant activities in a particular slide. The format for today, I'll just go a little bit about what artificial intelligence is, describe what an LLM is, and how it pertains to you and how it is currently affecting your class. As you know, people are already using this. Your students are already using this. I walked in today into the tutoring center, in the computer science tutoring center, and everybody had ChatGPT open. So whether you like it or not, it is here, basically, and we have to somehow figure out how to live with it and somehow actually improve the student learning experience with this moving forward. I'll also talk a little bit about what tools are available and also the pros and cons of AI in the classroom. I have a very special slide for my chemistry friends. If some of them are here, one of you will probably enjoy this. You'll either be horrified or enjoyed with my interaction with ChatGPT. We'll see. I'll explain a little bit about what prompt engineering is, because I'm not sure how comfortable everyone here is with ChatGPT. I do say that I see a lot of people using ChatGPT, but honestly, I'm not sure if a majority of students are using ChatGPT at this point. There's actually a large segment of them who have not seen it before, and perhaps the faculty have not used it. So what I'd like to do is to just show you some examples of how I use ChatGPT to increase my work efficiency and suggest some ways that you might be able to introduce ChatGPT in your class to get away from how students normally use it, which will often lead to like cheating and stuff. All right, so what is AI? We have a lot of AI classes here at in our department. One of the definitions that I like to use to describe AI is essentially creating a machine that performs functions that require intelligence when performed by people. So, in my opinion, not conscious and merely carrying out an algorithm that appears as if it is engaging in a social interaction with you. The algorithm that's causing all this fuss is a type of large language model. It's designed to create new content based on your input. And essentially, what it does is you give it some text. It actually converts your language, a sentence, into a vector of numbers, basically, and it applies a weight to that vector to produce new tokens that are then transformed back into language. The type of algorithm that they use to train this model is called backpropagation to train the weights, which happens to be the same algorithm from the 1980s that they talked about in the Terminator movies. Skynet. Skynet is a neural network-based artificial intelligence. It's actually what we're talking about here today, but it doesn't do anything crazy like they did in the Terminator movies. Honestly, all it does is if you give it text, it will iterate the text you have provided based on writing samples that it has seen before. They happen to have trained the thing on the majority of the internet and whatever might be publicly available, including research. How does that affect you? You may be familiar with something called the zone of proximal development. This is a long-standing educational theory about how your student learns from you. If they are sort of eager to learn from you and engaged, they are in some sort of zone, and you can consider it in terms of tiers of what they cannot do and what they can do unaided. And there is this sweet spot where you are learning, where they are learning with you, basically, through a social interaction where you serve as the knowledgeable other and are instructing them and they are benefiting from this. The key part here is that it is a social interaction. Learning is a social process. So, what can potentially happen here is, I guess, large language models are a type of conversational agent. So we're talking about ChatGPT, DeepSeek, Claude, and Gemini. It simulates a social interaction. So I guess the question is, can LLMs assist you in the classroom? And how, as an instructor, do you facilitate this experience for the students in a way that helps but does not hinder or hurt their learning? So this slide is about the grant in particular. I'd like to thank my colleague JJ Wong, who is our evaluator on the grant, for introducing this evaluation sort of scheme for understanding the project as a whole. Our goal is to design OER modules for a variety of courses using AI. And when you do this, when you design an educational strategy, you have to consider the holistic view of how the technology and the instructional methods and the content knowledge, or the topical knowledge, like the type of class, how they all interplay together. You cannot really study one of these items in isolation for an effective teaching strategy. So I guess some of the questions that we are exploring with this grant: how can students and instructors use LLMs? Perhaps the students haven't used any of these resources before. How should social interaction with an LLM be structured? What existing teaching strategies can we apply? So, for example, we have longstanding strategies such as the flipped classroom, active learning. How can you get technology to fit in these already established teaching paradigms? And you can also consider how it affects particular classes, which disciplines benefit from the inclusion of AI, and how these strategies should be applied. And finally, what sort of knowledge is needed to effectively integrate large language models in your class. So some of the tools that are available for you to implement this sort of thing, currently at CSUB, I want to point out here that there are a lot of free tier models out there, Claude, ChatGPT, etc., but there are resources that you can use specifically as an instructor. The free tier is somewhat useful, but what you're going to find out is it's rate limited, and they have different models available for the LLMs, and the best ones cost money, basically, which is probably not a surprise. So you've probably heard that the Chancellor's office spent a lot of money on an AI project. That project is software licenses for the CSU. Quite a few licenses have been purchased, and we intend to roll these licenses out. I don't want to speak. I don't want to speak for Chris or ITS here, but they will be rolling out the licenses for everyone. We are just sort of trying it out with the small populations with our grant, and the students now are actually using ChatGPT, the licenses that the CO is paying for. And one of the benefits of this is, I guess, the campus ownership of the conversations and the users. So if you're concerned about privacy, et cetera, the GDPR, CCPA, and all of that, it is a campus platform. You sign in with SSO, et cetera. There's also another service that you can look into if your field uses a lot of code. There is a platform called VS Code, and you can download an extension called GitHub Copilot. What happens is you have your editor, and off to the side, a window opens that you might as well consider a tab that is sort of linked to either ChatGPT or Claude, an LLM of your choice, and you're supposed to converse with it. I guess it's just convenient. It honestly, in my opinion, is not necessarily any different than having a tab open off to the side, but I guess if it's in your program itself, it becomes easier for you to converse with it. It does have a free tier, but it does require your students to upload some proof of them being a full-time student, and some of them had some issues with it. So it is also rate limited. So whatever resource you'd like to use, this stuff, ChatGPT Edu will be available, or if you wanted to get started with it, you might want to explore the GitHub Copilot option. What are some benefits and drawbacks to LLMs? I'm not sure if um, how I'm not sure how much you've used it, but I consider myself to be a power user. I use it almost on a daily basis. I guess for the people that maybe haven't tried it yet, it's pretty good at quick answers. The simplest way that you can use an LLM is some sort of automatic Google, basically, that's capable of some simple logical tasks. It's also very good at iterating text. So if you bring some text and you want to change it, such as going from one language to another, or to slightly edit the verbiage of text that you have provided, it is excellent at that. And I do want to tell a story for a class that I have right now. I have a student who is actually weak in English, and they get very confused with some of the materials that I provide, and we were able to move forward effectively when I suggested that they use ChatGPT as a go-between for my course materials when they are studying. And I've seen a huge improvement in their performance in the class. And that did not require me to translate the materials. It seems to be going okay so far. The idea is that they still they'll actually talk to me and sort of confirm what's going on, but it has helped a lot. It's also great at simulating social experiences, which is hopefully what we want to see for helping the students engage in their zone of proximal development with both you and the AI. However, it has a lot of limitations. One of the slides, one of the points I have on here is that sometimes for complex prompts or questions that you give it, it will give typical answers or stuff that is formatted in a particular way. Despite the fact that automatic AI detectors do not work and, in my opinion, should not be used, if you use ChatGPT a lot, you can actually spot someone who is often using ChatGPT in emails and text, probably because perhaps you had a lot of experience with that person beforehand, and you can tell, basically. On top of that, it does have its limitations and it may provide incorrect information, particularly if you're using the base model. And I'll explain this later, but as an instructor, you can augment it or continue to train it by providing additional context the moment when the student is using the the window when they're talking to ChatGPT in a particular session. But otherwise, if the students attempt to use it on their own, the novices may just sort of take what is given in ChatGPT and just accept it as fact. So we use this sort of model for the ZPD to explain how someone learns. The student is eager to learn. They are using ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is pretending to be the knowledgeable other. Without your guidance, the student may actually learn incorrect stuff. On top of that, depending on how students are using them, like directly asking questions and having them solved immediately, it may affect their problem solving and critical thinking skills because the AI is doing the logic for them, basically. A question is how you can like factor the interaction with ChatGPT so that this sort of thing doesn't happen. Some literature also identified that in classes when you integrate ChatGPT or allow your students to freely use it, it widens the digital skill gap. So, as you know, among minority and disadvantaged students, perhaps there may be a digital skill gap, and you would hate to see that sort of persist, especially if this AI technology is effective. If they can't use it, then it's going to become an issue. So the big thing in literature, so I want to point out here that we're not the first to attempt to use ChatGPT in the classroom. I think it's it came out like in 2021, I think, so or 2022. So it's been out for many years. So people have actually run lots of case studies with what happens when you bring ChatGPT in your classroom. And one of the main themes is the scaffolding is still required to ensure student success. So, you might have this fear, am I going to be replaced by ChatGPT? I don't think so because they need the scaffolding. They need to be you need to explain to them how to use this thing. Scaffolding is on you as the instructor. You are the one that is responsible for providing this structure to them. Or rather, I hope that at the end of this presentation, we learn some skills where you can be open to sort of bringing ChatGPT in your class, but in an extremely limited way, perhaps, that you feel would help their learning. So it falls on us to teach the student how to use this correctly. I'm sure that so a lot of us are instructors here, you run into this problem generally with plagiarism where a student has done something and you call them on it, and some of them just had no idea that no one had actually told them that they should not be doing what they're doing. And I guess it just falls on us to make sure, like, hey, this is ChatGPT and this is how you're going to use it. Please do not use it for direct answer seeking or something like that. So, another analogy here. Please consider this. So, the university will offer calculators to all instructors and students who need it, but the instructors define the conditions where a calculator is permissible in your class. You still have ownership over your class. You can tell them exactly when they should and should not be using it. So these are two separate ChatGPT interactions. So the one on the right already, if you're a chemist, you probably are going to be like, "Oh my eyes, what is that?" So, anyways, the thing on the left is probably what you're afraid of, basically, and we want to get away from that. The idea, so well, the thing on the left is an engineering like homework question. Actually, that is a question that they will ask on something like the EIT. Basically, you have a vector field. Calculate the constant m, and then ChatGPT is capable of applying some equations, Maxwell's laws, calculating the partial derivatives here to calculate that it's 2. That is actually correct. So at some point, perhaps in 2021, when they released these first LLMs, it might have made a mistake. But at this point, it's generally correct, although, generally is probably not a high enough level to do like important engineering stuff. But one of the reasons why this works on the left as well is this question is a common example question in study materials. So it could be that it is not actually developing the underlying understanding of how to actually solve this question. It is simply regurgitating some material that it has seen on the internet. The thing on the right, so the thing on the left worked. This is like the thing that you fear, which is basically the students are inputting my homework questions into ChatGPT, and then it's actually coming out with the correct answer. The thing on the right is when honestly you catch them, basically, because they'd ask ChatGPT to do something and ask it to operate outside of its comfort zone. So it creates a lot of great images. It's great for art, but its ability to understand structure and art and produce diagrams is extremely weak. So this is water, I guess. So, anyways, is there someone here from the chemistry department? What is this? What actually is this? What can you say that this thing is on the right? I don't know.
It's
It's nonsense, right?
hydrogen peroxide.
Yeah, it says that, but then if you look, it's
No,
the structure.
if you're talking about the image,
Yes,
the main image is like cyclohexane, something like this. It's
something like
totally
that.
different from the water.
Yeah, yeah. No, it says it's water though. But anyways, so
But
that's
the
my
image is
point.
not water, you know?
It's not, no. So this is what I'm getting at. Like, if they're gonna do this, and they're already doing it, it's basically our job to help them to get away from the left side, which is like just directly answering the question and them not learning, and also to teach them that they need to avoid the right side, that basically this system has limitations, and there are certain scenarios where you should not be using it for this sort of thing. I did in class just as a joke. We tried to do a digital circuit diagram, and it drew a very cool looking artistic picture of a PCB, but it failed to answer the question. Um, so okay. So basically, I highlighted some issues for how you should not be using ChatGPT, and yet I'm still saying that you should. So perhaps I should explain how you should be using it. So the thing on the left that you fear as an instructor is this basically. So I've color coded this. The light gold is basically the student. The light blue is an interaction with the LLM, and the gray is an instructor or your role in what happens. The issue currently, if we decide that we do not want to bring LLMs into our classroom, is that the students will use it to answer questions in the worst case, and they would have no idea what was right or wrong. They would be given hydrogen peroxide or something like that instead of water. So basically, notice here the instructor is not involved. Basically, this is the thing that you fear. Basically, they're using ChatGPT to do the homework. So what I'm suggesting is certain interactions where you could encourage students to use it so that they're aware of it and that they know how they should be using it instead of just answering questions. So a potential improvement that you can introduce as a type of as the instructor is to suggest particular prompts. So you can provide messages that the students will provide to ChatGPT that will greatly alter its behavior. And that might seem simple, but actually that whole thing is called prompt engineering. There's now an entire field of study in computing and data analysis. There are people whose job title is actually prompt engineer, whose job it is to improve how everybody interacts with the LLM to improve their work efficiency. So there are ways that people have studied for you to limit or produce a particular behavior that you want to see in your class that might coincide with known instructional strategies. Another improvement, you so the main problem appears to be that the student is using ChatGPT to produce the answer. But what if you flipped the situation so the student is not giving the student is the one giving the answer, and a combination of you and the LLM are providing feedback to help the student along. So you change it so it is only iterating stuff that it has provided. A main problem with LLMs when you ask it to like generate stuff, it is great at art, but unless it has explicitly seen some sort of math question before, it may be wrong. Basically, if it's like logic or a diagram, it may make a mistake. So you avoid that scenario by asking it to not generate from the ground up, but to iterate. These models are iterative models that change text basically, and I would not recommend generation of content from the ground up from these machines unless you were doing some sort of art or some sort of like an artistic experience or something like that. Let's see here. So how do you do that? So it could be that people here haven't used ChatGPT before. That's totally fine. And one of my goals is maybe after I show you some safe ways to use it, I'm hoping that you'll actually like open it up and just sort of have a conversation with it. Perhaps you have not heard of something called prompt engineering. So when you open up your ChatGPT window, the first thing you say is probably the prompt or question you have. However, you have to, for more complicated problems, you will spend a lot of time explaining yourself, explaining the content that it needs to properly solve whatever you're asking, and also the format for output. So, for example, are you working on are you working on a website in HTML, or are you doing a LaTeX document, uh, or does it need to be line numbered equations for a proof or something like that? Also, any kind of constraints. The LLM will respond based on its training data, and perhaps you need it to respond in another context. So, for example, I am using a particular textbook or I am using a particular document. Please do not use blog posts to support your responses or something like that. So, here's an example of one way that you might be able to introduce ChatGPT in your class just a social interaction, for example. So, one of the purposes of this grant is like OER. We're supposed to be generating educational modules, and I hope that as a community we can kind of get away from the idea of generating static content. We're in the business of educational experiences. Your lecture, by the way, is legally defined as an artistic performance. So that's what we could focus on, basically, is to develop reproducible prompts that will give a dynamic educational experience to the student. So what if I was able to give enough context to a prompt about, let's say, Alan Turing and chemical morphogenesis, to give particular papers to a ChatGPT prompt, and perhaps this might be for a class for non-majors where they could pretend to talk to Alan Turing himself and have an experience where they're learning about this through ChatGPT, who is pretending to be Alan Turing. All right, some sort of dynamic experience rather than static OER content. And what I'd like to do actually is to just sort of share. I have a screenshot, but give me a sec here. Where is it? Um, Let me see if I can find it. Just give me a sec, please. I have ChatGPT open, and what I would like to do is to actually show you. So actually, I can't find it. We'll just move on. I have lots of prompts and stuff that I'd really like to show you, but there's other prompts that I'll show you actually. So as a basic step, if you were going to do this, if you were going to try to create some interesting experience for your student, this is how you control it. Basically, you provide the prompt, you specify exactly what the output condition is, any safety constraints that you as an instructor want to impose on the interaction, and then finally your stuff, your lecture notes and everything, so that whatever information the student uses is consistent with your class. This isn't exactly this is not exactly an instructional method, but as I said, I want to show you some of the ways that I use ChatGPT as a power user. So, does everyone here know the trope of reviewer number two? So in peer review, there's this meme about how reviewer number two is always very aggressive and combative with you, basically. So perhaps you can use ChatGPT as a simulated peer review experience, basically. I'm not saying don't take people's manuscripts and have ChatGPT review it for you. That actually is a violation of people's privacy. I'm saying you, like your own stuff, basically. If you have a manuscript or if you have a grant narrative, and let's say, for example, let's say manual is not available or something like that, like it's 4 in the morning, or your colleague isn't available that you normally talk to, ChatGPT can be a stand-in for that sort of situation. So, for example, what are some parts of the prompt that I would use? So this is critical because ChatGPT is normally its default behavior is actually very friendly, and it will not try to be aggressive with you, basically. So if you want it to be, you have to tell it explicitly. So, for example, take a contrarian critical stance on the provided text, offering well-supported explanations. This one is really important. I'm not sure if that was in the previous one, but we talked about how it's creative and it may generate new ideas. When you're talking about rating scientific papers and stuff, you don't want it to create new stuff on the fly, basically. That would be bad. So avoid speculation, improvisation, external sources, relying only on your training data. So basically, I ask it to not go to the internet. Basically, I ask it to not bring up Reddit posts to back up its statements. Focus on logical, theoretical, and material aspects. Steer clear of superficial comments on grammar, although that might go against the trope of reviewer number two. Use established theories for solid, convincing arguments. Ask for clarification. Communicate in an academic tone. And then finally, please wait. I will now upload my content and you will provide feedback on it. So what I would like to do is show you something. So when we were applying for this grant, with the California Learning Lab. So when we were applying for this grant for the California Learning Lab, they actually said, because they were pro ChatGPT, they said it was totally fine to use ChatGPT while you were writing the grant, and I totally did that. So the main theme here, one of the themes that I want to sort of hammer home here is do not use it to generate content from scratch. What I have explained is a method where I have text and I'm only asking it to iterate or provide feedback uh, for me, basically. And here is the prompt that I said, basically, blah, blah, blah. Please wait. I don't have the please wait. Oh, yeah, please wait. I will now input context. So my entire narrative, basically, and it will provide or it will simulate a peer review experience so that I can make my work stronger. So I don't, obviously, you want to interact with a human. Like we're humans, we love talking to each other, that sort of thing. But your colleagues aren't always available, especially when you got to submit the thing and it's like you need immediate feedback and you only have 30 minutes. Well, maybe I should get ChatGPT's take on this. Maybe I had missed something like that. So I use this a lot for academic stuff, and I don't think I've ever, a part of this actually is like how to use ChatGPT. So if you've never seen this before, if you've literally never opened ChatGPT, perhaps there's some benefit to me sort of explaining what this is. So when you get your CSUB ChatGPT account, you will sign in using your work email address. Basically, this is my own personal one, and the official ones will have like a CSUB logo there, that sort of thing. What you're looking at is the window where students will then sort of talk, this sort of stuff. We can write a rebuttal here, that sort of thing, and then continue with the interaction. There's also a window here where you can select a particular model of LLM that you're using. They have all these different names. You may want to study them and figure out which is the best one for you. Some of the more advanced ones with ChatGPT, which is the license that you will receive through CSUB, will still be rate limited. So, just as a tip, you might want to start out with some of the older models that are not rate limited, so that you can save your exchanges for serious stuff or something like that. The thing on the left is your history, stuff that you had previously asked before. So, for example, my wife was worried about cold cuts during pregnancy, so I started debating with ChatGPT about whether it was real. It is. It absolutely is. I was wrong. My wife and my mom being a doctor, and ChatGPT all saying that she shouldn't have cold cuts, that sort of thing. Yeah. So basically, one of the benefits of the CSUB account again is that it's an official platform. So the student information is safe. Although I'll give a couple of notes later, basically about how you shouldn't use it to grade, that sort of stuff. But it would be an official platform. So all right. So let me go back here. So I was just showing you how to use ChatGPT as reviewer number two. That's all really cool and interesting, but like we were talking about how your students would benefit from it. Hopefully, what I pointed out might benefit you. The idea that you can use it to iterate text, that sort of thing. So, we're currently experimenting with different methods. So, Anja, Maruti, and I each are developing our own protocols. So, I'd like to take some time to explain a couple of classroom protocols that I'm trying out. There are two of them. One of them is intended for an advanced class where students complete kind of complicated labs with a lot of topics using ChatGPT as a helper to have them articulate their thought process as they approach a complicated task. So in class, my students will use an LLM. I tell them you can use ChatGPT, but only under the specific parameters that I have provided. I give them the prompt and I give them the exact documents or text that they then must input, and then there it goes. There is an assistant, a tutor working with them when I essentially am not available. It's like a 35-person class. There's only so much attention that I can give to everyone, basically, and you wouldn't want them just sort of sitting there waiting with their questions unanswered. um, ChatGPT that has been retrained on on my own documents, on my own lab manuals, should be sufficient. So the prompt I have explicitly prevents them from giving the students answers. So I want to point out here, we talked about how prompt engineering, et cetera, et cetera. So here I'm asking ChatGPT to adopt the persona of essentially a K through 12 teacher using something called Think Aloud Protocol. Think Aloud Protocol is when students are like in a classroom, they are supposed to articulate what they are seeing and what they are sensing. And then on top of that, the teacher will give them feedback. So in this situation, as the facilitator, please provide quick critiques or asides that help me in the form of questions. Do not give me a direct answer. So this is sort of like, so it is still able to assess whether the student is doing right or wrong, but instead of telling them or directly telling them the answer, it is asking them questions back to sort of guide the activity. There's also instructions in here where basically if ChatGPT is acting consistently in its facilitator persona, it will have this markdown where it labels its text as facilitator. And if for some reason the student does something that's outside of the parameters I've defined, it actually writes violation. If they actually just get irritated and are like, please just solve this for me, it will say violation. I'm not supposed to do that, or something like that. And then the student then uploads the material given to them, given to them by me. So let me go ahead and share this. I'd like to share this on Claude. I found that Claude is the most, it's the most like human-like experience. But it's also expensive basically, and its free tier is useless. So I just wanted to show you sort of like the maximum like sort of performance you can get out of this. So basically, this is just the prompt that I had already explained, and you can see already it confirms that it's the facilitator and it wants to guide me through. Please provide the context. So here, this was the first lab in computer architecture where they did a bunch of C programs. So I gave it the entire lab manual, and you can give it as much context as you need. And so now it understands that we're working with benchmark code. Would you like to begin? So my first statement, I need to create C source for a main function for my whatever benchmark program that is. Already, it was not happy with me because I was supposed to be discussing stuff in terms of what I am sensing or experiencing. It already gave me a violation. So, all right, well, thanks. I see that there is a main source that I must insert into Vim. And what you can see here is the sort of interaction that they might benefit from. It's not giving them the answer. It's guiding their activity with a question. So what elements do you see? I see that there is some code here. This header should be used for functions like printf. Good observation. What other information do you see? And this sort of stuff can go on. Unfortunately, I hit the free tier limit on Claude, but you should have a sufficient amount of prompts, with the services that we're providing. I just happened to. The only reason I'm bringing this up in Claude is that when I did it in class, I just chose to do it in Claude. You could easily have done this same thing in ChatGPT. So let me go back to the slides now. So one of the things that I found is that this sort of thing is great, like for advanced classes. You may be teaching a class where it just like this might actually be overkill for lower division classes. You don't need to engage in like a 15-minute conversation with somebody about maybe some lower division classes where, for example, like college algebra or something like that, you explain PEMDAS. This is PEMDAS. This is an algorithm you follow. And then it's more of like frequent, repetitive sort of exercises to sort of reinforce their knowledge. So this is slightly different. This follows the other methodology that I recommend, where the student's the one providing the answers. So not an expectation that the student is having ChatGPT solve it for them. ChatGPT is providing them critical feedback. Big asterisk here. Do not ask it to grade. Okay, I'll explain that later. That's a violation of people's privacy. They're only volunteering their answers and asking for feedback on it. That is not to be taken as their grade, essentially. So perhaps off to the side, you have them sort of actually write out answers and submit that instead, and that's what you grade, basically. So if you have an existing advanced teaching methodology, so for example, for myself, flipped classroom, I use that a lot, PBL, team-based learning, whatever you have, you can use ChatGPT to procedurally generate the activities in your class. Everybody gets their own set of homework assignments, that sort of thing, and we all solve it in the activity together. And ChatGPT is capable of providing some sort of basic feedback to students if they're willing to put their answers into the thing. I want to just some math here. So you might feel as an instructor like, wait, am I going to get replaced by AI in this situation? I want to point out no, because you still, in my experience, they will actually prefer to talk to you. Like they're paying to talk to you. They want to talk to you. But I think the reality here, if you have 50 students in a 150-minute activity, you can only give them 3 minutes of your time. All right. That math doesn't work out, basically. You can't you just the reality is you want to give your students the attention that they need, but it's just not possible. So like this is explained in this way, maybe you're able to have them proceed, you know, without you, basically, because you would use prompt engineering to ensure that ChatGPT was acting on your behalf with information that you had given it in this very constrained scenario. Okay. It's basically your assistant. That's one way to think of it. I don't have a TA. We don't have a graduate program in computer science. ChatGPT can be the TA, I guess. All right. It's not controlling the class. I am. I'm the one providing the material. And they would still prefer to talk to me rather than this thing, you know? Let me see here. So actually, does it provide good exercises? So this is all about context. So if you're able to provide prompts where so I can show you a couple of prompts that I had used. Just give me a sec here. I have a prepared dialogue here. So for example, I'm taking an algebra class. Please generate 15 expressions. I was not specific enough, basically. Is it good? It's as good as your ability or skill in prompt engineering, because I'm not sure if that's not a college algebra question to me, basically. So an important part of prompt engineering is revision. So it requires a lot of it requires you to be dynamic and fluid and to acknowledge that perhaps we need to modify the prompt to get what you need. So, for example, college algebra, something like that, slightly iterated to produce examples, procedurally generate examples. And I want to point out the way that I framed the prompt was to calculate the answer, but only provide the question. So internally, it has some concept of what the answer should be and how to respond to feedback, but we're explicitly telling it to not give the answers. The idea is the student's giving the answer first. It's only providing feedback. So for example, for question one, I obtained the following, this sort of thing where I intentionally, or I don't know, I'm a computer scientist. I'm not good at math, right? So here I'll add 8 and 2 first, times 5. ChatGPT is capable of understanding this statement. It's in LaTeX, basically. So here I had intentionally made a mistake, and it's able to provide some feedback. All right. So a question from Melissa: does it actually calculate the answer, or is this the water structure all over again? I'm not sure, but I suppose that as you're doing this, you may want to just sort of test if it is working for your class. I imagine that for the reality for this stuff, it is capable of very simple logic and carrying out stuff like this. Yes, it can actually calculate the answer for simple things. However, for stuff that it's at the edge of what the internet would have talked about. So for example, I teach an assembly class that is very low level, and a lot of my labs are custom to the point where I've had to look at the documentation on Linus Torvalds GitHub to make labs, on system calls. Um, I would not use ChatGPT in that scenario where your class would be so on the edge of like what the internet would normally have talked about because it's basically trained on the internet. All right. I'm not sure. I don't have a clear answer for that, but maybe just try it out and see what happens. Okay. So just moving on here to the rest of the presentation. So those are a couple of methods that we currently have. Let's see. So a couple of words of caution. So at the moment, I can only recommend that you use this thing for language. Images are great for art, but I would not actually use this thing for images for your class unless it was like art. The large language models can be wrong even when told not to hallucinate. Um, and my recommendation is to not use LLMs in generative ways. Despite the name, it being a generative AI, my recommendation is to use it for iteration and not for generation, unless your intent is for it to be creative. And just some privacy concerns here. Do you want to totally avoid putting personal identifiers into the LLM? Even though with our official CSUB license, it's my understanding that it might be CCPR compliant, like and protect the students' identities. Some things like personal identifiers are just not good practice to put into this thing. Or generally, also do not use it for automatic grading or assessment because I think that's a pretty serious violation of FERPA, I'd imagine. Another limitation, the idea of context windows, which are when ChatGPT is doing its inner workings, it has these notions of tokens or concepts, and each model has a finite limit to the number of tokens it is currently juggling. Claude can have 200K, and ChatGPT models actually vary a lot in terms of the number of tokens. So when you see this statement here, ChatGPT 3.5, 16K, that means that some of the older ChatGPT models could only juggle 16,000 word tokens in one conversation. All right. And, in the image on the right, I think I saw this on Reddit, honestly. And, it was, it's only as good as its training data, which is why you want to always provide as much context as possible. Um, a lot of plagiarized academic papers refer to this term as vegetative electron microscopy because it was trained on academic papers where the word vegetative was very close to the word electron microscopy. So a lot of papers were retracted because they were using this nonsense term. Um, all right. So some final thoughts. As the instructor, you will always be responsible for the structure of your class. And ChatGPT can help in some specific scenarios, particularly when you factor your lessons to include them in a way that would avoid ChatGPT giving a direct answer. It can be made to make a fun and engaging experience for your student, like role play, some interesting non-major courses, perhaps in science history, where you could interact with ChatGPT pretending to be the person themselves. But remember, it is only your assistant, and remember to double check things. And then the image on the right, I too actually gave ChatGPT my entire grant narrative and asked it to generate some art that embodied the concept of our grant, and it produced this. So it looks pretty cool, although I think this gentleman here is in the middle of a table, or I don't know. It's a part of his legs. So that's how you can catch it, right? Because AI has these weird things. Basically, that guy's. I don't know what's going on with that guy on the table on the left, but all right. So that is everything. I guess anyone have any questions? Or thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, this is truly a much better picture. Apparently, ChatGPT like your like your proposal. Okay, so do we have any questions from the audience? I do see there is one question from the the Padlet. So to help other faculty using AI, do you have some available use case with prompt to share?
Yes. So the previous methodologies that I submitted, if you want my prompt, I'll just put it in the chat there, basically. I'm open to that. Here, you can have you can actually have my whole prompts. We're currently reviewing these items in a peer review as well, so I'm pretty confident just sharing it because I'm pretty sure it'll get accepted. But this is about sort of sharing and sort of iterating our materials, right? These prompts these ones have been effective. The think aloud one works in a complex sort of exercise, and for simpler exercises, for like a lower division class, you can use it to procedurally generate a bunch of exercises during activities or labs. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. And there's 2 questions. Yeah.
I think Said can ask the question and then I can say.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you, Albert. This presentation is very actually timely.